Hello, everyone, and welcome. Sorry about our stage chatter here, but welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A. I'm Dave McCormick, making it just in the nick of time here. I'm also the VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And I'm pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick, no relation, although sometimes we say we're brothers, but no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha. We'll begin today's session like we do every Wednesday by going over a quick demonstration of some capability of Alpha. And then after that, actually I think we're talking about deployment today, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, we're going to do a little different. I came across something I really wanted to share with everybody. So,
fantastic.
And then we'll finish the DevOps series after our fabulous DevCon.
Great. And also we want to, we're here to take your questions as well. So any type of Alpha Anywhere question, as basic or as complex as you want to make it, go ahead and type it into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. And I will look through those and I will attempt to stump Dion with them, although he's pretty hard to stump. So we'll go from there. Hey Dion, so I can see your screen, so let's get started.
All right. Well, hey, thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. Very, very busy here at Alpha, at World Headquarters of Alpha Software. We have our fabulous developers conference coming up in literally 2 weeks. It's just, man, this came up quickly, didn't it, Dave? I mean, it's amazing how fast. I thought we had more time. Never works out that way. But we are in the throes of finalizing and tuning up all the presentations and getting everything ready for the training and the event. You know what's awesome is I can't wait to go, and you know, even though I'll be doing some training and other pieces there, I can't wait to sit in on the new updates and announcements, Project Tetris, the roadmap, all these things are coming. It's going to be a phenomenal event, and so very excited myself personally, and it's also in an amazing place up there in Newport, so it's going to be a fun time. So we're very busy doing that, and but we want to make sure we keep the ball rolling, and one of the ways we do that is to make sure that we try to answer the questions of our esteemed developers. So if you're joining us, you have questions, take the time in our control panel, go to your questions area, enter your questions there, and then we will be more than glad to try and answer those. And if we can't answer them, we follow up on them. We're very diligent on that. And also remember, if in case you come across questions, you don't have to wait to actually attend the event here. You can always send them to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com, and we monitor that very closely, and we try to make sure we include that into it or help people out from that standpoint there. So questions, we want your questions, so we look forward to getting that. As David mentioned, I was working on a series, and we got part of the way through it. We were doing what was called the DevOps series, and we, for the last 2 weeks we've handled it. We're going to do the last one at the very end. In fact, the DevOps series included, the first was process and environment, how to set up an environment to effectively create and test your application before it's out in the hands of the users, how to manage that. We also talked about source control with Alpha, and actually we're planning on doing a little bit more work on that. I was very surprised, and Sarah I think can mention this too, is we got some really good feedback that there's a lot of interest out in the developer arena. How do you use source control with Alpha? And we did some quick demos, showed some outline, etc. But we're going to go back and revisit that as soon as we can after the developers conference is over, because there's a very high level of interest in that there. And then when we come back, we're also going to talk about what's called monitoring, DevOps monitoring. And the reason that's important is that DevOps is a continual process, i.e. the figure 8 you see here. The idea is you decide what you're going to do, you code it, build it, test it, make sure that is done effectively, release it to the world, deploy it, and then you actually have your users, people operating it. But a key part of that is the feedback loop of, okay, what's going on out there? How are people using it? Are there problems, issues, etc.? So we're going to come back after the DevCon and talk a little bit more about how you can use the native capabilities of Alpha to monitor what's going on out in the world, and also more importantly is some techniques that we see where you can enhance that to add your own kind of data collection for your application, and there's different places you can do that and different ways to handle that. So we're going to cover that, and that will complete our DevOps series. So we'll probably do another touch point on source control given the interest level on that. we'll do our monitoring one from this week. Had a very interesting opportunity. I was working with a client, and I wanted to go through this. And this was a situation where a company was using a list control, and they had kind of a very complex scenario of what they wanted to show in the list control. And they had created these very complex queries and this and that, and it just was kind of cumbersome. It wasn't coming together quickly. So I worked with them and showed them how they could use a Xbasic function to populate a list. And it turned out to very simplify the existing solution they were looking for, and also triggered a lot of thinking of, oh, you know what, if I can do it that way, then I'll be able to do these other things with it. Now, there's certain good things about it and certain limitations. I'm going to talk about that today, but I wanted to dig into that a little bit more because I'm not sure if people have really experienced the list control and all the power that's built into it. And so I want to do a real quick demo, show you how you can, the different flavors of how to do that, and then obviously open it up for a Q&A from that standpoint from there. So I'm going to dive right in. So this is going to be a bit more code-centric today than you're probably used to, but it's very little code that you actually have to do. So I'm going to go back into my development environment, and for people who are new, this is my development environment. I'm at the Web Projects, and I'm going to go ahead and click New, and I'm going to go ahead and go to Web Component UX, and then I'm going to create a UX control, which is our form one. Instead of selecting any particular, I'm just going to create a blank one because I just kind of want to more show the concepts below from that. So we'll go list, let's see, custom underscore UX. Okay, so we have our list control, or we have our custom. So I can start adding in my different data controls and put them in there on this. So I'll do that. Now, what I would like to do is first run through and show you how we normally do, we use SQL data sources, which should be your go-to. You should always try as much as possible to use SQL data source because then a lot of the heavy lifting is taken care of for you. I'm going to go here and I'm going to click here and do a list control. And I'm just going to do list of customers. And instead of doing my quick setup genie, I kind of want to walk you through setting up a list control from scratch. So I'm going to click OK. That will add my list control here. I'm going to go ahead and either I can double click on the list control, or I can go over here to list properties. Data process check. Is my audio, video coming through okay?
So far, so good, yes.
Okay, dynamite. Always want to make sure I'm not talking to myself as usual. So happens more than you know. So you'll see I've opened up my list. And you'll see we have multiple types of data sources. So let me walk you through this real quick. One that you're probably most familiar with is SQL. So connecting to a SQL data source. And we're going to spend a few moments on that in a few moments. The other alternative is DBF. So if you still have DBF data, you can use it. I mean, we really have all that capability in history. So you don't necessarily have to convert DBF to SQL to be able to use DBF. Static is a static list. Basically, it allows you to create a static set of data that you can include on those lists. So if it's never going to change and it's like a list of divisions or whatever, you can just create it as static and use it from there. Custom is very cool. And what we're going to do is that's what we're really focusing on here. What custom is where you create a function and the list control will call the function to get the data to be displayed in the list. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now there's two other ones. One is data series, which is our data series component. Basically that's very SQL, is that built into every UX we have this data series editor that allows you to point to a backend data source and then use it there. So if you've already created some data series, you can use it here. And then last but not least is JavaScript function. So you could literally create a JavaScript function to populate a list. And this is very powerful because since it's JavaScript, this could be a client-side operation. So for instance, let's say you built a mobile app and you want to display status information on a list. Well, that mobile app could, in JavaScript, pull a whole bunch of data from what's going on in the mobile app without any connection to the server and then present that data to the list for display. So a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can attack it. Now, again, as I mentioned, SQL should be your go-to for two reasons. One is that it connects directly into the data source, it handles all the offline stuff, and most importantly, it handles the synchronization for you automatically, meaning that if you use a SQL backend data source, then Alpha will handle the synchronization. If you use the other methods, especially the one I'm going to talk about today, if it's a two-way situation where people are editing data and sending back, then the result, then it's going to be your responsibility to write the synchronization code. So that's why I say go to SQL. If you can't use SQL, custom is always available. And it depends, like, you know, you may not have an issue where you have to edit the information and send it back. Then custom works out really, really good. So awesome. So first, let me do a cool one. So I've selected SQL. I'm going here to the connection string, and I'm selecting my connection string. In this case, I'm connecting to MySQL, a SQL data source. Now I'm telling it how I want to do that. And as I mentioned before, you could just select a list of fields or create your SQL system yourself. And that's kind of cool. Actually, turned out that the client needed to do some really interesting things with SQL queries. So you're able to do some kind of unique queries to help them out on that. But again, what happened was the Xbasic was really what turned out to be the better solution. So I'll go into, I'm going to go ahead and here select custom. You'll notice I'm seeing both tables and views. And then I'm going to go here to the list of customers, or I'm sorry, the fields that are in the customers table. Select those. I could set a filter, an order, etc. In fact, let's set an order. Do it by company name. So I want it sorted by company name when I'm in the list. And then I'm going to go here to the list layout. Since this is just a demo, I'm just going to go ahead and use our columnar format. And so therefore, I'm just going to set it up as column, going to preview list down here. And you can see here's my previewed data. It's okay. So now I have a database connected list, and you'll see that it pulls my customers and it's putting them in from that standpoint there. And you'll also notice that it is filtered it from if you'll notice the company name is in hierarchy. I've got some junk data in there from testing, so that's why that's sitting there. So we have that. That is your straightforward go-to methodology. But let's go ahead and walk through and show you how to set up a specific list that actually uses Xbasic Function to deploy the information. And I hope that once you see it, you'll get a feel for how powerful this could be. I'm going to click List. I'm going to call this List Custom. Okay? And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to make them side by side. So I'm going to get rid of my line break right here. Okay, I'm going in here. Now, instead of SQL here, I'm going to go to custom. And the key thing with custom is here. It says we need a Xbasic function. Now, one thing I'll show you is that there's an egg problem with it, is that and I'll show you how I normally do this, and so it does it. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a function name. And I'm going to call that, let's call it my list populate is just the function name I'm going to call. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to click the ellipsis button here. This opens up a little hand. And the neat thing about this, see, we can give you a sample function so you don't have to set up from scratch. So I've set up my function name. I'm clicking here sample Xbasic function, and I'm given either a template only, no sample code, a simple example, or a complete. In my case, I'm going to click simple example. So here you go. Here is the example function, and it's actually a pretty exhaustive. I'm going to copy that to the clip, and I'm going to click OK. I really need to have that function already defined, and this is kind of a tricky thing, but so what I do is after I put in the Xbasic function name, I go in here and copy it to the clipboard. Okay, I just cancel out. I go over here to Xbasic functions and I paste. And the reason I do that is that before I finish my list, I want to go ahead and have some data be able to show it to it. So the basic way a list works, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the sample code right here. And also, by the way, the other thing I do is I create a little sample set of this script, so in the future I can just paste it in and go from there. So I'm going to go text is equal to, and I'll explain what this is, name, country, John, Germany, and I'll explain this a little bit more. England, and then Jane, USA. Okay. And then I'll go list populate is equal to text. Okay. So it created a basic one, and actually if you look at that detail, it shows you how to call a database and do the other things. But I want to kind of start very, very simply and explain the key concept of what's going on when it's calling the function. So if we go back to our database, you'll notice that when we did our query, it presented us with a series of fields, and these were the fields that I selected. And then I took those fields and laid them out on there. So what the list is expecting from the custom command is a list of fields and some data that's associated with it. And there's two ways you can provide that information back to the list. One way is just simple delimited text. The other is JSON. So you can actually use either method. It's up to you. Now, to keep things simple in here, you'll see that I have created a very simple delimited list. So the first row is name and country. So those are my two fields, name and country. And they're divided by what's called a pipe, or I guess that's a pipe character. That's the delimiter, the default delimiter. Then you'll notice I have 3 rows of data, John, Germany, Bill, England, Jane, USA. And then what I do is I return from the function that text. Okay. Now, the reason I say it's a chicken and egg situation is that when you create your list and you say it's a custom function, if I haven't actually gone in here and set this up, then when the list say, and in fact, I'll show you what it looks like here, and I'm going to just cut this out for a moment. Then I'm going to go into my list. Notice I am doing a custom, and I'm calling that function. But watch when I go to fields. Problem. I don't. Is it populate list or is it list populate? Let me see here. Let me make sure I did that right. List populate. Okay.
Dion, can I interrupt you for 1 minute?
Oh, sure.
So some people on this call are having issues with audio. For me, it's coming through loud and clear, and we're in different cities and all that. So if you could just maybe take a 1 minute pause, and for the people who are having problems with audio, if you could just drop out and then connect back in, you may find that issue goes away. It often does fix the problem. There's something about it.
Yeah, and we're sorry. We hate that. By the way, this is being recorded.
Yep.
And the recording should have good audio quality. So you'll always be able to replay it in the future.
Yeah. So if you guys want to drop out and come back, wow, it looks like a lot of people.
Wow.
10, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh my goodness. Well, is anyone out there having a good experience with audio, or is it just me and Dion?
Yeah. I wonder if we make
the number's climbing back up. They're rejoining us. Wonderful.
Okay. Maybe they're just using it as an opportunity to say, I'm out of here.
You know, they came back, Dion. I'm impressed. Yeah.
I know. Well, that will tell us how interesting we really are. Yeah. It's like...
I know. All right. All right. So, yeah, let's see.
Thank you, everybody. I hate that when I'm on a call and it's not great. So
the audio is bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good. It looks like we're more or less back where we were. So thanks everyone for rejoining. All right. Sorry to interrupt, but carry on.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay. So where I was before was that I wanted to show you an example where if I hadn't taken the time to create that function right here, what would happen? So I've selected custom, I've selected my list populate, and I deleted my text. So now what's going to happen is you'll notice, oh, wait a minute here, it's empty. And the reason why is it actually called this command, but it didn't get anything back. So that's why we have this chicken and egg kind of problem. So what you want to do is use the technique of naming it here and grabbing the sample Xbasic function, then go out into the Xbasic functions and create a little sample. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, to start out, you could just literally just put the field names on here and some junk data on there. And then when I go back and go into my list of custom, you'll notice something now. Oops. Custom, list, populate. Check it out. So what it did is it called that function, it found that data I returned, which was just a simple delimited list, and now I can start using this. And in fact, I can go here to list layout, and I'll go ahead and select these, put them on there. I can do a preview, and check it out, John, Bill, Jane, Germany, England, USA. So that's why I mentioned it's a chicken and egg problem. But once you're done with that, then you're home free. Everything looks the same. You'll notice that I can adjust the display formats of it. I can display the control type. You know, everything is basically the same as if you went to SQL. You just have to write that little function. And including your list layout, I'm using a columnar function here. But this could easily be a, you know, a free-form structure from that standpoint. So let's go back and talk about a little this function here. So as I mentioned before, the job of the function is to return a set of data. And that data includes the field names, in this case the first row of my data, and some data associated with it. Now also in there, which is kind of cool, is that you can use JSON. So if you're using JSON, you can return it and Alpha will say, oh, that's delimited, use delimited. If not, you could use JSON. And there's a couple reasons for that. What's really nice is that if you are calling a web service, what you can do is in your function, instead of generating the data there, you could literally call an external web service. That web service will return a set of JSON. You can then clean it up and then hand it back. And so we've actually seen this happen as we had a demonstration where we called web services for the, it's called for the World Cup. And now we could use that JSON data in our list. So it's up to you what you feel comfortable with. Now, once we've got that, the fun can start happening. You can use any Xbasic you want in this list, in this function. And what it will do is that means you can make calls to a database, you can make calls to a web service, you can manipulate data, you can make multiple calls. So what you can do is you could create a custom function that actually literally synthesizes all this data, maybe gets a list of items from here, then gets their statuses from this other table, and then reviews them and marks them a certain way in this other way, and then returns all that back to the list. And the beauty of that is that in the list now, I can just kind of like lay things out and make it look pretty, but I don't have to worry about adding a lot of complexity. I don't have to add a whole bunch of custom controls or other things along those lines. This is a very effective tool if you have some level of complexity in terms of manipulating the data or preparing the data before it's actually sent to the list. So now I do working preview. You'll see, boom, 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 boom. It's populated, it just works there. Now another powerful thing about this too is I'm going to go ahead and add a button in here, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and click button here, and I'm going to say refresh, okay? So I'm going to double click this button. I'm going to write some JavaScript, but I'm going to click add new action since I'm going to use some built-in action JavaScript. And I'm going to go list, and you'll see we have to control actions, and the actions, we have a ton of them. You know, we can list to everything. The one I'm looking for is refresh the data in a list, but check out this. You can remove the role. You can do all this really cool things, and all these are pre-made for you, so you don't have to go out and worry, even to the point of import data into a list from Excel and ASCII or export it. Crazy cool stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now I'm going to click save. Okay, so now I have this button here. Now, nothing's actually going to work. You know, you're not seeing anything. It's actually what it's doing is refreshing this list. And every time I click here, the list calls that function, runs that function, then updates it from here. So let's do a little experiment. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put a little data control. And I'm going to call this input. Okay, and I'm going to default that to a 1. Okay. So now we have this input 1. And when I click refresh and input is 1, I want all 3 of these rows to show. If I put or let's say I put in 3, I want all 3. But if I put in 2, I only want 2 of these Yeah, just kind of for demo purposes. So now what we can do is we can go into our Xbasic function. I can go dim input as in, input is equal to, and it's e.data submitted dot input. So basically I can take a field that's on the front end. Now I can say if input is equal to 3, then else, okay, or actually I'll do it a little more brute force, and I'll go if input is equal to 2, then actually, you know what? Let's do this. This is even more fun. Let's go select case input is equal to 1, case input is equal to 2, case input is equal to 3, and then we'll go in select. Okay, great. So I'm going to say, going to grab this, put that there, here, put that here, and here. So this is a very contrived case. So we're going to go like this. Oh. Let's see, there's 2 there, and then 3, and then let's do this. Let's just say case other, just in case. We're going to return nothing but the field names. Okay. Okay. And so now let's go in and take a look at it. Oh wait, e.input. Oh wait, did I give it the wrong name? That shows me. I know what's going on. Because we didn't actually call it first, so I just need to do one other thing like that. If eval, and I'll come back and explain. I know I told you it's going to be a little bit more coding, so in this kind of I'll explain a little bit of the nuances here. Okay.
For those of you who are new to our Q&A webinars, we typically don't get into this. Often we do actually get into this much code, although Alpha is
well, no, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. But exactly. But if you're on and you're new and you say,
I don't want to freak you out.
I'm being freaked out. Don't worry. This is not something you're gonna have to handle very much. It's more for our advanced folks here.
Okay. Okay. So you'll notice here that all 3 are there. Now I'm going to click 2. And then 3. Why is that not working? Sorry. This teaches you don't do these demos on the fly. Might tell which one I want to actually refresh. List custom. Okay. There we go. Okay. So why am I doing this? Not necessarily to bore you to death, but I want to show you that the list control populated by a custom function is very powerful. The only tricky part about it is that, like, when you load the list, you got to make sure everything's, set up properly. And you have to set up the function there. So what's going on is this. When I click here and I put a number in here and I click refresh, when I click refresh, I'm telling this list to update yourself, to refresh the data in the list. When that happens, the list will automatically call that back in function, run the function, and then display the data that is given back to it. So the cool thing about that is that now you can have some really cool things going on. Meaning that you can take information from the front end and send it back and be able to use that during the population of this list. And we see it in certain situations, like where you want to take the data in the list and do some database updates and then return the results back, things along those lines. And again, start with SQL. You'll notice there's no coding available for it, but what you're going on there. So let me just explain a little bit more of what's going on here. So every time I want to refresh this list, it does a list populate. I had to put this little code in here because guess what? First time I run this thing, we're not going to have any submitted data. So I just say, hey, if it's coming back, then go ahead and show this. If not, just go ahead and default it to 3. That way, the first time you load up the screen, it's going to be perfect. But here's the heart of it. What we do is we take that data from the front end user interface input and put it into a variable, and then based on that variable I then give it back a certain set of data. You'll notice I'm always giving it back the name and country, but in this case I'm giving back 1 row, this one 2 rows, this row 3 rows here. And again, this is a very simplistic example, hard-coded, but as you can see there's a lot of flexibilities to it. And the other thing that's important is when I click the refresh button, all I have to do is tell it to refresh this list and the rest will automatically happen. We don't actually have to do any other fancy things like actually call. The list itself is going to say where am I getting my data, and it's either going to go back to the SQL database or from there. So I know this has been a little bit more code, but I got to tell you the custom list is extremely powerful because it allows you to do some really cool manipulations of the data before it's presented in the list, manipulations that may be complex if you're trying to bring it back from a SQL database, but actually become very easy because Xbasic is so flexible. The other part of it is control, and not necessarily going to a database, but maybe you're going to a web service. Maybe you're going to an old text file you're pulling up. You want to open up an Excel file and put that data in the list. You can do all of that with this functionality because you are in control and you have the full power of Xbasic that's available to do that. So I know it's a little bit more code than we're used to. That's why we say we're little or no code, meaning we try to be no code, but sometimes there's little code on it. But it's really simple. You can see a lot of other stuff going on there. And again, once you've developed it, everything else you're doing on here. So for instance, I can now go in here to these fields and say, okay, I can change the styling and everything else. Don't have to do that. I just merely go in and change those pieces here. Like for instance, I can and the style and the color and all those kind of things along those lines within here. So that is my quick and introduction to custom list population. It's a lot of fun, a lot of powerful capabilities, and again, one of the powers of Alpha is you can do a lot of things very quickly with no code, but if you need to do something special, we've got the hooks and the capabilities for you to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dave for any questions, and we'll go from there.
Excellent. Let's start at the beginning. One question we have here, let me just find it real quick. Oh, I got a lot of questions, so this is good. One had to do with when you set up your function to return data to the list. Can you specify different data types, or do you not need to do that?
Yes,
like numbers, dates, yeah.
Yeah, you can specify that so that these fields are denoted with, notice they're character fields, that's the default here. But yeah, you can specify and instruct the list that, hey, this field is numeric, the different types of data types that are available. And you do that in terms of giving it the information. I believe you do it in the header row. You tell it what each column type is.
Fantastic.
By the way, you can also a simple way is that here you can actually just pass everything as character strings, and then you can tell it to transform it to a data number, a logical, actually, and the list will take care of that stuff for you.
Fantastic. So many, let me just sort through here. Couple questions about doing CRUD, CRUD operations. We've seen how to populate a list. Would it be possible to update that list doing a CRUD operation the other way?
Absolutely. Very good point. You can connect this list to a detail view and use all those techniques there. The important differentiator is that, let's go ahead and connect this to a detail view. The important thing here is that when you do the synchronization, you're now going to be responsible for the actual code that synchronizes it on the back end. So what happens is when you synchronize it, you're going to call a function. And let me go ahead and just show you what this looks like. So I'll go sync list function. So we created a function to populate the list, we also need a function to then synchronize it, because Alpha is going to say, hey, guess what? I don't know where this data came from other than a function. So what I'm going to do is when I'm ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and collect the changes and the differences. So I'm going to handle things on the mobile platform. But then what I'm going to do is send back to a function that you're responsible for all that information. And here is the example code that goes with it. What's nice about that is that there's a bunch of sample information on here, and it will give you all the information. It gives you all the list data. It also includes the list data in a JSON format there. It's going to have information about what's changed, what's different, etc. So yes, you can use the full capabilities to do that, but realize you're going to have to be responsible for this function here for actually applying the differences, including any conflict tracking. So for instance, if you changed a record and then you submitted it back for, it's going to tell you which records are changed. Then it's your job to look at it, look at the original data and then do the comparison. But then also you can send a message back to in the function saying, well, wait, we've got a conflict for this one, please change. So we can do all the capabilities. It's just you're responsible a little bit more with, you're just responsible for the plumbing that normally we don't. And that's why, again, I always say use SQL to start with, and then from there, you're good to go.
Great. Now, someone else asked, okay, that's fine, but what if I decided to change my function because I needed to add a column, you know, a date or something like that? Is that going to totally break everything, or?
Well, if you're adding a column, then the list is just going to ignore that because like, well, let's try it out real quick. Let's go ahead and go in here. And I'm going to go into mine. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and just add, we'll say, population. Maybe I should have picked a better word. Okay, let's copy this. Okay, so now if I go to my working preview, no problems. So you can actually add data on the fly. It does one thing about that, but now just go into the control itself, and now you're going to see in my fields I've got my new field, and then I can list layout and do my stuff there. So now if you delete a field, that could be problematic. You're going to have to make sure to edit your list to denote that that's not there anymore. So adding is no big deal, but yeah, you're going to have to kind of make sure that the list is in sync with the data that's going to be populated from there.
Excellent.
Good question. Very good question.
Another question. This one isn't about lists. It's about IIS, and we'll come back to list ones if there are any. And it just has to do with logging out. Like when you're using the security framework, what do you need to do something special to log out of your application besides use the standard function, as far as you know?
No, I mean, well, I use the standard function. So there's a function built into it. And actually, I'm going to go here. Let's go to documentation now, sock.com. By the way, that's reachable help documentation. Okay. I'll go log out. Oops. Might even be able to spell it right. I got a new keyboard. I'm still getting used to it.
Excellent.
Okay. So that's context.security.logout. And what that does is it clears the session variables and basically disables them as their role. So then anytime the security system sees it and says, oh, whoa, sorry, this session no longer, you got to go back and log in. So all you need to do is make sure you're omitting that, that on a script or on a callback or wherever you happen to want to do it from that standpoint.
Great. Here's a question on
JavaScript log out too. I don't know if there's a JavaScript command also to say that. Oh wait, yeah. You can also use dialog.object That's a JavaScript command, so it's client side. But I think what that does is it just calls that context.logout and sends it back to the backend piece there. Oh wait, yeah, but oh, it's interesting. You must have logged in using this UX component. Okay, so take that with a grain of salt. It has to do with, you know, if you are using a single UX and you've logged in through there, you can use that. But your safety is just do an AJAX callback with that logout and with that context.logout, and that's gonna boom, stop, you know, set the user so that they're no longer logged into the system.
Great. Another question back to lists. Can you make it so that the list loads without you having to hit the refresh button? You know, like when it's connected to SQL, as soon as you open up the control, you know, it has the data. Can you do it with the same way here?
Well, actually, it works that way, and that was the tricky part. Is that when it loads, well, in my list, let's be the default behavior is the moment a list is shown, it gets refreshed. So it's going to automatically do that. But you have other options saying delay till visible or delay till explicit refresh, because you may not want that loaded until certain things happen. So it's up to you. So when I click working preview, it automatically does a refresh on both these lists. That's why you see data here. And that was kind of the tricky part here, is that I didn't actually submit any data. I was getting an error because I was saying, oh, input is this. What the problem is the user didn't submit something from the front end. It was just the initial load up of the UX. So I just put a little command in here saying, hey, you know, if you haven't gotten it submitted, okay, I know you're just the first time I'm doing that, so I'm going to hard code that input level there so I don't have an error. But as to your question, the answer is yes. What will happen is this will automatically get refreshed when it opens up. You don't have to do anything explicit to tell it to do that. You can, though, disable that so that, like, for instance, I'm going to go ahead and go in here, and I'm going to say list properties, delay render until explicit refresh. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the working preview. You'll notice that it's empty because it didn't do that automatic. But now I'm going to click refresh, and it refreshes there. And that's handy because you may not want to show this stuff in this list until the user takes an action. And the other thing that's nice too is that, by the way, this other thing that's kind of cool is this, and you got to be careful about this one, but the other feature list until visible, if you have a bunch of panels, like a panel card structure, you may not want to force the person to sit there and wait for 5 or 6 hidden lists to be populated. You may just say, hey, you know what, wait till they're actually seeing the list before they see it. They'll see a little time, you know, they'll take, you know, when they go to the panel, they'll see a little delay while it populates the list, but you don't have this long delay while it's getting everything ready behind the scenes where the person's like, oh, the first list is here, why am I still waiting? So it's up to you. You have the control to be able to support those pieces there. Great question. Excellent question.
Terrific. All right. This one has to do with JavaScript, and but it's sort of it's just a general sort of approach or technique to it. And you know, is there a what helper tools are available in Alpha? And also, what do you use when creating JavaScript scripts? Do you usually write them strictly in Alpha? Do you use other tools as well? And what do you do to validate to validate your JavaScript? Because it's pretty easy to make a typographical error. And
very easy to do that. Well, first and foremost is I don't use any other tools, and I try to minimize the amount of JavaScript I write. You have to, you know, there's just no way around it because Alpha can't anticipate everything you need. But here's my number one trick. First thing I always do is I say, is there an action JavaScript that does something that I want or very similar to what I want? And that's where my starting point. And the reason is this: if you create that JavaScript, I can click this little button here. So I'm in the action JavaScript builder. Here's my list control action. I click view JavaScript. Hey, check it out. We'll show you what that JavaScript looks like. And so I can sit there and say, okay, great, copy. Then I can put it where I want to and adjust it. Now, another thing that's important is that built into the JavaScript editor now is, you know, you have built-in let's see, let me go, oh, this is closed. Let me go back here to this, here, JavaScript functions here, and I'll paste this here. Go ahead and paste it, okay. In here is a couple things. One is a full or JavaScript. So you can actually click here and it will show you, actually the better one you want to do is method here, and all the online JavaScript that you'd need. And different action job, all the JavaScript that we kind of use to manipulate things are built in here. And very important is that we an example of how to use that. So I can copy that example, go back here, and paste it in here, and this is syntactically correct. And then I can start editing it. So that way I have sort of a kind of a known solid basis to work off of. And then I can start editing it from there. Now you'll notice something also too. Check this out. Notice how it's highlighted in red. Well, Alpha does do JavaScript validation in there. And in fact, when I click save, you'll notice something here. Hey, there are errors in your JavaScript code. And it actually shows you where the error occurred here at Jones because I'm missing a little item there. So I'll go in here and I can click there and oh, the red went away and it's looking good from there. And you know, so I do all my JavaScript coding in here. I do a lot of Google searches for JavaScript example scripts. Like you know, you need to do like a common one is I've got to figure out what's today's date and format it a certain way. Well, there's tons of sites that have example scripts and you can just copy and paste them in here and then adjust them accordingly. So again, I use action JavaScript to first find out if there's an action I want to do, and because then I can just copy it directly within Alpha. Two, I use heavily this insert method here, and most importantly, the examples down here, because that allows me to use a proven set of little code. Lastly, I use, you know, the built-in editor here, and I think, you know, we have basically, you'll notice that it's got type ahead, or I guess what's that sense? So I can sit there and go dialog dot,
right?
Autocomplete,
Or autocomplete, auto-suggest.
Yeah, and it actually, what's really cool is that even built here too, I'm going to go here. Oh, I don't have any panels here, but you'll notice that it's giving me a little bit, you know, as I build this, it's telling me what it is, but also what I can do is I can right-click on this little area right here, and in this case, it would give me a list of panels that are on my screen. So I like to use that because then Alpha is building the syntactically correct statement for me, and therefore I have fewer, you know, fumble finger kind of errors from there. So it's a little bit of a most, but again, I really have no need to use outside. The only thing I might do is that is the used before, especially if you're getting, there's a tool called JS Fiddle, and JS Fiddle, you'll see links to this with sample code. And what it is that you can actually put in code here and run it, and it will tell you the result right here. So what's kind of cool about that, there's a huge amount of sample code out there, and you can run it in this JS Fiddle, and it's like you can actually run it right there. So if I'm writing a little piece of JavaScript to do like a date manipulation or something like that, I'll write it in here, run it in here, and then I can then copy it out and paste it into Alpha. So again, that's another little online tool, no cost for it. And you'll see when you look up source code out there, like example scripts, they'll say try in JS Fiddle, and you click there and they actually open up this tool, put the script there, and then you can tweak it from there. So not really a hardcore IDE, but it allows me to do some quick things here. And this actually works for both HTML, JavaScript, and CMS. So you can sit there and say bold hello, and then you can say run, and then it, I don't know where it shows, yeah, right over here. It's showing my JavaScript here, then it's also showing me this is what my HTML looks like. So kind of a cool tool. So great question, but a lot of it is built in. We've got the built-in error trapping, so if you go in here, you'll notice it's immediately saying, oh, I can't parse this, so it's immediate stuff, and you'll go from there and use the built-in method, because often trying to do, there's already a sample, and you just have to go in and tweak it accordingly, or take a couple different samples and kind of bolt them together.
Very cool. Question back to lists again, and again using a custom script or Xbasic script to generate the input of the list. The question is, could this be done, well actually there are two, but we'll start with this one. Could it be done with an RSS feed, which I believe is in XML format?
Yes, absolutely.
But you would
again,
need to convert it to JSON. Right.
Yeah. The lists only accept either the Elmer structure or, a delimited structure or JSON. But Alpha has a lot of really cool built-in features to read XML and stuff. So you can either write your own parser, but also, let me go ahead here and open the documentation again.
Right.
And
Alpha has a lot of parsers for XML and for JSON.
We have all these built-in functions for doing things. So like, for instance, you can take a property array, XML, or you can take XML into property array, and therefore then it's easier to manipulate. You don't have to sit there and write a whole bunch of string parsers to go through it. XML is a little bit of a tougher nut because it's overly confusing as far as I'm concerned, and that's why you're going to find most modern systems have gone to JSON and REST because of that fact. We kind of talked about that in our web services certification class, but hey, there are a lot of XML sources out there.
Exactly, especially
yeah,
RSS.
so not much you can do when that's the source that's coming in. I wish there was like a universal XML to JSON converting program, but even then the great minds can't solve that problem. So we've tried. But there are, check these out. If you are going to manipulate, go in and check out, like, for instance, property from XML. And what it allows you to do is you can go, like, you'll see grabbing this paid, which is a XML feed, like an RSS feed, and then you're running this command called property from XML, and then it allows you to then refer to that XML like this instead, so you can refer to, it builds like a hierarchy of content.rs, .channel, .item, etc. This takes a little bit of trial and error, but I'll tell you, this amount of code is a lot less than, okay, scan the string till you see the first, it does all that kind of extraction for you. So definitely, you'll notice right here, there's actually a good document here called Parsing XML Documents to Xbasic, and this goes through all the details and sample code that you will ever need. And by the way, thanks for bringing it up. That's an ideal example of why you would use a custom function with a list, because maybe you just want to show a list of tweets or a list of RSS feeds or something like that. Now we can use the power of Xbasic to grab that data, manipulate it, but then we can use the power of the list control to make it easy to make it look gorgeous for the end user. It's peanut butter and chocolate, the best of both worlds.
Excellent. That is a good combination.
It is really a good, I'm a big fan. Although I'll tell you this, and I'm not going to hurt the Reese's Pieces company. I love Reese's Pieces, but I like the Trader Joe's peanut butter and chocolate.
Those are good stuff. Good stuff. Agreed.
Luckily, we're not sponsored by Reese's, so I don't think we're going to lose our sponsorship. Probably. But hey, I got to be honest with our crowd. Right.
That's right.
And I think everybody would agree with me.
All right. Couple more questions about, actually, here's one question, which is, can a list show fields from multiple tables? And can you think of a couple different ways that you can, because I think we both know they can, but can you show a couple different ways in which you could do that?
Absolutely. First and foremost, you can, instead of a table, you could use a view. And a view obviously can manipulate and bring multiple tables together. So if I were working on this, I'd go in and say, can I create a view or a query, and use that, because that's going to be your fast and effective. Now, quick note, is that view editable? So if you want to bring in multiple tables and then edit that data, well, that view has to be editable within the database. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do with that. So it sounds more of a just, I want to collect this data and present it to the user, kind of a one-way deal. Now, that's method number one. Method number two is in my Xbasic function. There's no reason why I couldn't write a script to call a database, pull some data, call another table, pull that data, merge them together, and then spit them out in this kind of format here. And that's an ideal example of why you would use this to do that. So absolutely, you can use either a view built into the database, simpler, faster, easier if you can pull it off. If it's something a little bit more complicated, then I would, in that case, do that. And I'll tell you, the question I had from this client was, okay, I've got two tables, and they basically have they're based on the same data, and what I want to do is I want to find the matching records between those two tables. And so there's actually some cool SQL queries you can do that will look at two tables, look at two columns, and say, okay, here's what matches. But sometimes that's not easy if you're looking at, maybe there's multiple columns that you have to compare. That's ideal for an Xbasic script that pulls here, starts walking the records, and then says, okay, here is what I have left for you. And then I just put it in this format and display it on the list.
Cool. Here's one I certainly don't know the answer to offhand, but you may. And in a file upload, can you basically have a progress bar to show you how many bytes have been accumulated? Or show some sort of progress indicator?
And it's to the actual code. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put, I'm going to actually just put another button in here. Okay, so I'm going to go to my action JavaScript. I'm going to do a file upload. Okay, I don't have any controls. So I'm going to do a file user define. But the important thing is here is you have in here, you can, where is it? Show progress, allow cancel. So built into the action JavaScript is this show progress, which will show a progress bar of the upload of the process there. And again, it allows the canceling of that process there. Now that's going to show the time and the process of moving it from the client machine up to the server. Now if the server is doing processing after the fact, that's not going to happen here, but there you could then put up a message on the screen, and then when the processing is done, take that back down. But definitely built into our file upload action JavaScript is the ability to show the progress and also allow the person to cancel the progress as it goes.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Someone else pointed out that they use a custom, when they want to combine two tables, they use a custom SQL query. So while you were talking about views before, if we could actually take a peek back at this.
Sure.
SQL.
So you'll notice in here, this one's actually, let me go ahead and create a new list just to kind of show you how I would look at doing that from the get-go. Sure. I'm going to go list. I'm going to say list test. Okay, going to open up that list. And so I'm going to go to SQL. I'm going to define my connection string, actually. But now I'm saying here, we're defining the SQL query. Method 1 is fields from a table, but method 2 is custom. Right. So now what I can do is when I say custom, I can use the built-in alpha Genie to say, okay, I want customers and I want orders. Okay, now notice when I selected customers orders, say, well, how are they related to each other? So I'm going to say customers is customer ID and orders. So it's basically building SQL for me right here. Nice thing is I can actually sit there and do a query and see what's going on. So very, very handy to do that. And then I can show which columns I want, the filter, ordering, etc. Once I've done that, now I've got my fields. This is both the customer field, order fields. I can go ahead and do whatever I want to do and preview the list, and off to the races there. So again, when I do data source, I say custom SQL, and then I use our built-in developer to do that from there.
Terrific. Thanks very much. It looks like we've come to the end of our time, so I want to thank you, Dion, for presenting. I want to thank everyone who asked all of these questions. Unfortunately, we are not going to have a webinar next Wednesday. This might be new to Dion either, but as we get as we get prepared for DevCon, we have a lot of work to do between here and there, as he knows. We hope to see quite a few of you there. In the meantime, there was a question about where to find the recordings. Probably the best place for now is to look on YouTube. We are 2 weeks behind in getting these things posted, but I hope to get them up in the next couple of days and get caught up with the queue on that. Sorry, that is on me. But if you have any questions in the meantime, please send them the guides, guides@alphasoftware.com.
And thanks for
attending.
on the audio stuff. Thanks for sticking with us, and we apologize. And
Thanks for coming back. Yeah. We had a little bet on that, actually, but it all worked out. Thanks, guys. Take care, and goodbye.